Okay, so the purpose of this is to just process out what I feel the Lord has been highlighting to me, specifically personally for the season that I'm in, as a means of just safety and connection with Him. It's really good news. Sometimes when my face feels like it doesn't see the thing as good news, it makes me want to consider that. Sometimes I'm striving, sometimes I'm working, sometimes I'm coming here to do work, and my heart's not necessarily in the best spot, but sometimes getting through that is actually the process that's needed to get, to help me to kind of anchor on the truth, and kind of get my brain straightened out. So sometimes we'll observe that progression of redemption, right? That's okay. That's okay. So here's this topic, all right? It's called the table, the foxes, and the wolf. Okay? The table, the foxes, and the wolf. He prepares a table for us in the midst of our enemies. We are invited by the King to catch for us the foxes. And the wolves, which would be this stranger, right? This stranger's voice. So now we have the table in the midst of our enemies. And the reason this topic is so poignant to me right now is because in order for us to process through the way that God has information coming to us is designed to be in a place of safety. It's designed to be in a place of confidence with Him, right? And there's a whole level of relationship we go through to build confidence through faith and His faithfulness, right? There's a whole level of relationship. But in that relationship, we start to realize that we can hold His promises as more concrete than what we see. Okay? Through that process of relationship, there's this shift that happens where we are invited by God to acknowledge His promises as above and beyond what we see with our own eyes, and that's counted unto us as righteousness. To regard His promise as more concrete than what we see, okay? When I was going to therapy, before we could engage in anything, we would establish a safe place, okay? And this is a really interesting, there was bilateral stimulation involved, which has a neurological effect, and then there was also this engaging of your five senses in an atmosphere of safety in your mind. And using these tactics, we created an atmosphere of a safe place with which to reconcile the realities of a lie versus a truth. A lie that is causing me to panic versus a truth that would cause me to feel secure. Okay? Now, there's a little metric they give you that ranks how much you believe the lie versus how much you believe the truth, and you track your process over multiple sessions as those two things are meant to trade places. Okay? And so you do this over a safe place, which would be a table to dine, right? A safe place. Even in the midst of your enemies, He prepares a table for us in the midst of our enemies. And that allows us to clearly inspect stuff, the problem in front of us, well, in acknowledgement of Him, okay? So there's always something placed in front of us, and we always have the option to lean on our own understanding or to acknowledge Him. And in this progression here, this lie versus the truth is going to be a shifting of acknowledging Him over our own understanding, which can be very, very flawed and inaccurate, okay? So this is good news. So being in a safe place is huge. So now you're inspecting what's in front of you from a safe place, a table, right? Now there's these foxes, right? So catch for us the foxes, these little foxes that are trying to spoil our these blossoms while they're in bloom, right? And we are invited to catch these foxes that are running around in our vineyard of love. The way the Lord, I believe, has revealed these foxes to me as His negative propagations of thought. There is, man doesn't live on bread alone, but from every word that proceeds from the mouth of God, okay? Manna That's in Deuteronomy 8, I think. There's manna that was given to them, and if they saved even the good thing that God was giving them today, this food, this bread, and then disconnected that from relationship, so we weren't receiving the preceding words of God over our life in the present, in the right now moments, that manna they saved actually became stinky. That good thing actually became stinky and full of worms, even overnight. Man doesn't live by bread alone, but from every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. And then there's this Seder feast, this feast of unleavened bread that the Jewish people were called into doing as a regular practice, which meant that they had to remove not just all the bread made with leaven in their homes, also all the bread made with leaven in their borders. It was this place of zero leaven, this place of zero leaven to I believe to receive the leaven of the kingdom of God, right? That nothing would rise us, nothing would propagate inside of our minds before that, right? It's really important. And so now you have like these other leavens that Jesus mentions in Mark 8:15, which is the leaven of the Pharisees and of Herod, and how these leavens are to be avoided, right? And I believe he's speaking of propagations of thought, the way that we are reconciling the world to ourselves, right? And then I think there's also something to be said of sort of a sourdough leaven, if you're thinking of your propagations of thought, right? Just the spirit of the air being in the world. There's these free radical thought processes that are all over the place, that kind of want to just lodge themselves in the rising dough of our minds and to propagate themselves. And what happens is, now that we have dealt with the table and we feel safe, we're looking at the problem in front of us. Now we're left with having to go through with our minds and observe this thing. And now if we have like religious leaven, we might be looking at it like this and believing some of these lies. Or if we have political leaven, we might be looking at it like this and propagating it wrongly, right? You got the Pharisees, which I guess what you'd say was religious, and then you've got Herod, which I guess you would say is political. But then I think there's also other random stuff. But we're invited to not lean on our own understanding, but in all our ways acknowledge him, right? And so we go back to zero to receive new, right? New. And that's why my sheep will know my voice, and the stranger's voice will be strange to them, right? Because we've propagated this level of thinking that is based off of his word and his promises, which are rooted in places we don't see, that our own understanding cannot comprehend. And because of that, when these wolves howl, right, when these other voices, these other strangers are trying to speak into our lives, right, it sounds strange to us because we have propagated a propagation of thought based off of his faithfulness and reliability over and above what we see. You all right? I locked you out? You'll be all right. Let me let her in. Oh, you did get it. Okay, good job. She pushed through. You're all right. And so now we are, yeah, you're all right. Come here. Come on, baby. So now we have this propagation of thought based on the kingdom's leaven, which takes every thought captive into the knowledge of Jesus, right? That's the big difference. That's the big difference, is that Jesus is at the place of all power, honor, and authority presently. So when we think about the situations of life based on his kingship and lordship in our life, him being our shepherd in those moments, his reliability being our shepherd, and his place of all power, honor, and authority, we're taking every thought captive in that manner, right? Into the knowledge of Jesus Christ, who is seated presently at the highest place, right? And he is. The end of every gospel is reconciled with the prophecies in Psalm 110 will tell us emphatically that is presently the case. And so now we take every thought captive into the knowledge of Jesus Christ, right? And this is this propagation, right? And in that process, we're catching for us the foxes, right? So there's these thoughts that are exalting themselves above the knowledge of Jesus Christ, and we're catching those foxes. And the Aramaic implication is actually prisoners of war in that verse. Taking every thought captive as prisoners of war, thereby made benign, as they are in the light of the promises of Jesus' authority. Catch for us the foxes that are trying to spoil the things. These are these negative propagations of thought that are trying to take what's going on right now and get us to analyze it based off of these things that are not acknowledging Christ's authority, right? So that's catching the foxes. So you got the table, you got the foxes, and now you've got the wolves, right? I think it's fine to even just say the enemy, the wolf. Even though there's a lot of other stuff going on, I think it's great. I think it is phenomenal, not to overcomplicate this. As I've been learning in the last couple of weeks, right? This is all just my whatever. But like, I think it's been very, very helpful, and I felt like the Lord was actually tuning me in that direction. Through a random thumb flip into Jude, that showed me that even the archangel Michael didn't argue with Satan, but he simply said, "The Lord Yahweh rebuke you." Okay, he simply said, "The Lord Yahweh rebuke you," and then I looked up that word rebuke, and it actually means to like censure, to take a full appraisal of the validity and the station, to either declare very good or very bad. It's rebuke. So he wasn't even making any claims or implications on the lies of the enemy's stance. He simply said, "The Lord Yahweh rebuke you," right? Now, when I was reading through that, I was like, man, like this is like adjuring. This is like taking somebody to court almost. And it reminded me, I think, of Caiaphas. Was it Caiaphas, the head priest who said to Jesus when they were about to crucify him, "I adjure you by the living God," right? And when I made that connection in my heart, I was like, oh, I don't like that connection. But then I realized that he's reconciling all things unto himself. And I realized that I think it was also, was it Caiaphas or Pilate or somebody in that time frame said, it's better for one man to die that all the people would be saved. That's definitely exalting Jesus. That's somebody who's currently talking about crucifying him, and that word being shifted into a direct exaltation of him. All is for his glory. All is for his name. He is preeminent above all existence, and he's reconciling all things unto himself. And so, isn't that beautiful? Now that thing's exalting him, and just the same way, I adjure you by the living God. Well, I can't remember the exact passage, but it basically lays out pretty clearly that we are connected to Jesus Christ, who is connected to Yahweh God. And so my thought process kind of shifts, and it's almost like what I would say in that moment to the wolf, right, would be, I adjure you by the living God, Jesus Christ. And now in that moment, Caiaphas, or whoever that said, I adjure you by the living God, that thing has been redeemed. That thing has been redeemed, because now the living God is the one that he was adjuring him by, and now it's... So I think that's really cool. And in doing that, you are submitting to God. You submit yourself to God, thereby resisting the enemy, and the enemy fleeing from you, because the conversation looks like this. The wolf is growling. Okay? When a dog barks into a bush and a quail flies out, the dog just intimidated. He didn't describe the context of the intimidation. He simply intimidated, and the quail's own imagination did the rest. So he didn't there wasn't like a big conversation exchange. There was simply this level of intimidation, right? So now you get this wolf that's snarling at the sheep's face, intimidation, and trying to employ our imagination to do the rest, to get us to run from our shepherd into our own understanding, right? But what the conversation looks like is you got this wolf snarling in the sheep's face, and the sheep says, I don't know what to tell you about all of this, right? I'm not going to argue with you like the archangel Michael didn't argue with Satan. He simply said, the Lord Yahweh rebuke you. So as we say, I adjure you by the living God, Jesus Christ, we're kind of saying, interesting. I don't know what to say about that, but, take it up with my shepherd. He'll evaluate the validity of your intimidation that you are barking at me. And I mean, his rod and his staff comfort me, right? They comfort me. I don't think they're going to comfort you. And so now you have the picture of the shepherd properly evaluating this wolf and him fleeing from you. So submit yourself to God, thereby resisting the enemy, and he flees from you, which is just so cool. And so that's the table, the foxes, and the wolf, and that's this concept that God has been using in me to help me to actually, he's helping me to live in love is what's going on. Because my problem is that I keep praying about is, Lord, I'm like, man, I feel like you're growing me in being able to listen to you, right? But in my trying to only do what I see you doing, I'm so concentrating on that I'm actually not carrying this in love, which according to 1 Corinthians 13, verse 2, no matter if I'm doing all this stuff great, I'm nothing without love. Love always considers the outcome, and God is love, and he who lives in love lives in God and God in him. And so if I'm not being loving in these things, I need to carry the truth in love, right? It's a very powerful thing. And so I just love that, and I'm excited to grow that way. But it's all about being able to stay in seamless connection with your shepherd, right? And allowing him to receive that. Like, that's what he wants from us, is seamless connection. He doesn't want like our works to unravel and for us to like obey and make all this stuff happen. Like, we need to acknowledge that he's the one who's doing it, that he's the one who's reconciling all things unto himself. But we've been invited into that ministry of reconciliation. Some sow, some water, but only God brings the increase. There's this priority, right? Jesus only did what he saw the Father doing. He had lots of options, but it was through seamless connection with the Father that he actually acted. And that's the kind of relationship we are invited into as we follow in our Messiah, in our Rabbi's footsteps. And in that way, we can actually steward the fruit of the relationship that he's giving us. And so there's this reality that those who drink from me, out of their bellies will flow rivers of living water. Rivers. There's this concept of pressed down, shaken together, spilling out onto our lap, more than enough, right? And if we just wanted to like let that river just crush somebody without any love, that's that, like, love that actually binds things in harmony. That's kind of like the way that love acts. It binds like faith and hope in a perfect harmony. Love is something that binds things together in perfect harmony. Love is the fulfillment of the law. If you love me, you'll do my commandments. Love sets right what a lot is made wrong, right? Love conquers all. Love is amazing. And so in this, a beautiful, I've been calling it the cytoplasm of love that binds all the parts of the cell together in perfect harmony. Because the cytoplasm sends electrical signals back and forth into the different elements in a cell. It's really cool. I felt like that was from the Lord too. But it's a whole thing. But the whole thing is that as we're growing in relationship with him, and there's rivers of living water, right? We're not just blowing people's hair back with it. We're being led forward in love. And in that, we realize that what he's prioritizing is our connection with him. If we take this with different leavens, that would be based on performance, prioritizing performance over connection. And then what's going to happen is we are going to think that everything he reveals to us is meant for whoever's around us, and we're not going to realize that he actually wants to have a relationship with just us, because we need to understand that Psalm 110, verse 3 and 7 says that his people will be his love offerings. Refreshed by love, he will stand victorious, right? So he's refreshed by the love of his people, and it actually says he will drink from his inheritance as from a flowing brook. Refreshed by love, he will stand victorious. So it's not only that he's refreshed by it, it's actually his inheritance. And then Ephesians 1 verse 18 talks about, like, I pray that the light of your imagination, for the illumination of your imagination, to, for God to illuminate that thing, and that you would have full revelation of what God's doing, the revelation of your hope, and that the result of that would be that you would be a holy inheritance, a glorious inheritance to him. So it's really, and then there's this, in verse 3 of 110, it says, in the brightness of your holy ones you will shine. And at the end of Ephesians 1:18, it says, your glorious inheritances, your holy ones. And so there's this concept of him receiving us wholly unto himself as an inheritance. And it's just a really beautiful thing. But we need to understand that he's reconciling us to himself. And from that place of abundant, heaped down, pressed down, shaken together, royalty is what that is. We're the king's bride. royalty more than enough. From that place, we look out with love and we look at people and we say, what do I have that I can give to what they need? And that is living properly. That is like proper alignment. And so it's been a really huge gift, but all these little elements have been floating around all over the place, and I'm just trying to and I feel like the Lord kind of quickened this thing in my heart with the table, the foxes, and the wolf to kind of put down this way in which this way in which we sort of carry through life, right? Because there are these different powers and principalities we're wrestling with, but they're in unseen places, and he's the one who reigns at the highest place of the unseen. So we, the way we wrestle with him is through the acknowledgement of Jesus Christ, bringing everything into correct exaltation of him, taking every thought captive. And then if there's like a direct demonic thing, I adjure you by the living God, Jesus Christ. Let him see how much weight your bark actually carries. So your snarl, right? Sometimes I call that a low level of worrying concern in my heart. That's like a snarl, trying to get me to run into my own understanding. But actually, when I feel that, I've been realizing that's kind of invitation. That snarl, I adjure you by the living God, Jesus Christ. It's good news, isn't it? So, all right, I love that.